Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephen Rayan, a faculty member in Mathematics and Statistics and a member of the College of Arts and Science Planning Advisory Committee. On behalf of the college and the committee, I want to extend a very warm welcome to you as you join us today for our Think Big, Be Bold College Plan Milestone Celebration. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship to one another. One of the college plan pillars being celebrated this year is implementing new curricula. In support of this pillar, we have assembled an expert panel around the theme of curriculum in the college, past, present, and future. We are inescapably aware that, as part of the present and future, the ongoing pandemic is causing us to rethink many aspects of curriculum and course design, and we hope to get some insight into this during the discussions. Now, it's very exciting that we have three distinguished dynamic scholars from the college with us today. We have Dr. Simonne Horowitz. A past Rhodes Scholar, Dr. Horowitz is an associate professor in our college's Department of History, where her research and teaching focus on African history and history of medicine. She's been the recipient of 2 Provost Teaching Awards and 2 USSU Teaching Excellence Awards, and last year received the George Ivany Award for Internationalization. Dr. Horowitz is passionate about inclusive pedagogy and works towards a classroom which is both a safe and productive space for all students. We also have Prof. Dean McNeill with us. A trumpet player and composer, Prof. McNeill is head of the Department of Music, where he's been a professor of brass and jazz for 24 years. He is currently artistic director of the Saskatoon Jazz Orchestra and a member of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra. Having commissioned many new musical works, Dean has been involved in a variety of interdisciplinary artistic projects on and off our campus, and has judged many high-profile music competitions both regionally and nationally. Amongst his lengthy list of awards are both the USSU Teaching Excellence Award and the Department of Music's Dwayne Nelson Teaching Award. And last but not least, we have Dr. Chris Todd. Dr. Todd is a professor and head of the Department of Biology. He is a plant molecular biologist with an active research program focusing on molecular mechanisms driving plant responses to biotic and abiotic stresses. Over his career, he has worked to integrate research into his undergraduate teaching. A winner of the college's Distinguished Teacher Award and the Provost Award for Outstanding Innovation in Learning, Dr. Todd is currently interested in increasing course-based undergraduate research and incorporating undergraduate publishing into his classes. Now that we know who our panelists are, I want to get underway with a question for them. Our first question is, what do you feel has been the most innovative aspect of your course design or delivery prior to the pandemic? I'll begin with Simonne.
Thank you very much. I'll focus on 2 things briefly. And the first is my study abroad to South Africa, and the second is my inclusive pedagogy. So from the time I arrived here, I was desperately trying to find a way to take students from Saskatchewan and expose them to a broader worldview and to allow them to move outside of their comfort zones to have experiential learning. And I set up a 6-week study abroad program in South Africa, which I've been running every 2 or 3 years. We were supposed to go this year when the pandemic hit and we were grounded. And students spend 6 weeks learning in South Africa, doing courses, meeting people from all different backgrounds, traveling to different places. And it really opens their eyes in a way that nothing on the campus here could do. And so I've been very proud of that. And then secondly, as you said in my bio, the inclusive classroom is something that is really important to me. And I developed a handout for students for the beginning of term where I asked them about their gendered pronouns, what pronouns they prefer, what name they prefer. And I feel that that's very important because it signals not only to the students who are gender variant, but to all students that this is a safe space. And I work in my class to create a space that is racially gendered, religious tolerance at the center. I encourage parents or caregivers to bring children or those that they are caring for into the classroom if they need to, and we work around them. And of course that's changed all with COVID. But to create that space where everybody feels inclusive and everybody can learn is a huge way of making a learning environment that is good for everybody. And then to be able to take that a step further and take some students, usually 10 at a time, to South Africa has been what I'm most proud of in my curriculum innovation.
Thanks so much, Simonne and Dean.
Well, there's a number of things that we're very proud of in our department. We have many connections to the community pre-university and post-university. Ours is a very integrated experience for our students. Most recently, we've figured out a way for string majors in our department to be able to play in the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra, which is a fully professional organization, and receive university credit for it. And we have many different ways of connecting and reaching out to the community to support what's going on culturally and musically in the schools. The fine arts are perhaps somewhat unique in the sense that we are always very sensitive to what's going on in the community, because we are so profoundly connected to our community and vice versa. So when the pandemic hit, we really had to rethink what we did, because we are literally in the business of bringing people shoulder to shoulder on stage and in the audience together. So it was a real challenge for us, and maybe we'll address that in the next round of questions. But in particular, yeah, one thing that I think that is just so unique about what we do here is how connected we are, from everything from the symphony to we run music workshops here, music programs in the summer. We have our faculty going out and connecting with people in the community, getting pieces of music jointly run. There's connections between the Saskatoon Jazz Orchestra and our university. So it's a very, very busy place, and it's a place that is welcomed, or that is a very welcoming place as well.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Dean. And Chris?
Thanks, Stephen. I think for me, it speaks a little bit to what we were talking about in the bio, blending and blurring the line between research and teaching. And so one of the things I'm most proud of is a fourth-year functional genomics class that I've been offering. It's a lab-based course where we take senior students and we connect them to large publicly available data sets. And then we teach them how to work with this data, and then also how to break it down into manageable bits so that they can actually design hypotheses and experiments and test them at the bench. So this is going from tens of thousands of genes down to something that they can accomplish over a series of weeks. It's always lots of fun to be in the lab with the students. And what I was really looking forward to this year is that in the past, that's typically been an individual-based project where students are working in parallel and really trying to integrate some group work and try and get the students all moving together in the same direction on a project and developing that set of skills as well.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to hear about. So then for our next question, I'd like to ask, what has been the most innovative aspect of your course design or delivery during the pandemic? And Chris, we'll start with you this time.
Thanks. I think before I talk about anything I've done in my course, I'm going to promote some of the work of some of my colleagues. And I think it just points to the fact that during the pandemic, there's been no one right way to do anything. So I've been really impressed with one of our very large physiology classes, over 200, 300 students a term, where my colleagues were able to figure out a way for students to come to campus and get electronic equipment they could bring home, hook up to their laptops, and hook themselves up and record physiological data and use that as a real hands-on learning experience as a member of a group, and then bring that back to campus, get it sanitized, turn around, and to another student for the next week. And they've been doing this since September. It's been a fabulous job. For me, I couldn't send the whole molecular biology lab home with the students, so that wasn't going to happen. And so we transitioned to a sort of a traditional, current topics seminar-based class. But what I did this term is I took all the reins off and I let it be student-led and group-centric. And I think at the beginning, there was a little bit of uncomfortableness with that as sort of the parameters were taken off and students had to find their feet. But by this point in the term, all I can say is it's gone outstanding. I've been incredibly impressed by the work they've been able to develop. And honestly, it's really the best part of my week.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. Thanks, Chris. Simonne, what about you? What innovations have been spurred for you by the pandemic?
I'm undergrad director in the Department of History, so we had to quickly pivot. And I think what I'm most proud of, three things. First is the department itself and how our department managed to get half of our courses synchronous and half of our courses asynchronous so that we could appeal to both groups of students. And we were able to put together very quickly a brochure of how our courses would be run. And my colleagues have done amazing things in keeping the courses running. For myself, my innovation was to make the online course look as much like an in-class course as possible. And so I have periods of time before and after class when we would all stand around and talk. I try to mirror as much in my seminars of the class as possible. I try to do the same kind of group work where I pop in and out. And so to try and give the students some sense, and I think that that's been really important. And I also, it's my favorite time of the week is talking to the students, because for many of them, it's the only time they talk to human beings. And then finally, Erica Dick, also in the history department, and Scott Napper from medicine, and have put together a course on viruses and immunology and pandemics. And we had the course in the back of our minds before the pandemic broke out. But when the pandemic hit, we actually started teaching the course. And so it's the first time we've had an interdisciplinary course taught by the sciences and by historians. We have half of the class scientists and half of the class are historians. And we are doing group projects where they are looking at diseases in different contexts and working through it. And I think it's been a wonderful way of learning from one another.
Thanks, Simonne. And that interdisciplinary aspect definitely sounds very exciting. Dean, how about you?
Well, as you can imagine, a music department is in the business of doing things. And when the pandemic hit, we really were scratching our heads. My department has done amazing things over the spring and fall and into the new year here. One of the things that we did is we created a weekly gathering session of our department to bring together people in community and to share new ideas. We've had talks on wellness for musicians. We've had an extended fine arts research lecture series where we've had some terrific speakers. We started a faculty and friends concert series with the idea that examples often make the best teachers. So we were able to still have faculty and people in the community perform for our students and have discussion sessions about that. In the fall, all of our courses, except for some of our applied lessons, were offered online, and that was a real challenge for us. And in the spring, and I do have to say how much I very much appreciate the support of the pandemic response team and our college administration, who worked very, very hard with our department to allow certain things to come back onto campus, applied lessons, ensembles, although people could still participate on ensembles virtually, and a few performance-based classes. And we figured out a way to live stream our third and fourth year and graduate recitals. So these are where the students performing in Convocation Hall, but there's no audience. All of these things took technical challenges. They really required a lot of people. A lot of the aspect of our department is in normal times quite iterative, where people are doing things and you're assessing them and discussing them and responding to them very, very quickly. The most obvious example is a jazz improvisation class that I teach. So with latency, you cannot perform in real time with people. So we had to work at different ways of figuring out ways of still getting people to be reactive and responsive and emotive with music, but at the same time, realize that there are certain limitations to the technology that we simply had to acknowledge, kind of like Chris's point that you can't just send the whole group home with a biology lab. So it was, it's been an interesting time. People have really done an exceptional job. The other thing that we did is we created quite a comprehensive newsletter, and we've done 2 versions of that, partially to remind our students and again the community of who we are, what we are, why we do what we do, how we do what we do, but to also provide opportunities or a platform to share new things. There's been a lot of our ensembles creating these virtual videos where everyone is, and audio where people are are going online and mounting their individual part to a piece of music. And then we'll have that mixed down and then sharing it with the group. And all of that is in our spring 2020 newsletter and our winter 2021 newsletter. So it's been an interesting time. Some things actually have come out of this in an even more strong way, which I had not predicted. For example, excuse me, some of our courses where students are required to perform in real time certain assignments. Well, we can't do that, so they were having to submit videotapes of them performing. And what invariably happens, instead of just performing once and having it be done, you record it, you watch it, you learn something, you re-record it again. So again, we didn't have the iterative process between the performer and other members, but people kind of had self-iterative processes. So one thing I noticed in the jazz improvisation class last spring is through going this process of submitting things electronically, video and audio recordings is actually the quality of the final product. We had a bit of a bump there in a positive trajectory in ways that I would not have anticipated.
Well, thanks, Dean. And it's especially good to know that the college and the pandemic recovery team were able to help music with the technical challenges of bringing to life in this kind of climate the communal and collaborative nature of music and musical instruction.
They worked very, very hard at this because we really did. Of course, our number one priority was keeping everyone as safe as possible, but they really heard what our specific needs were. And I would imagine our needs were much more significant than most, if not all, the other departments in our college. So yeah, they really did work very hard, and we really appreciate it because much of what we do just does not work in a traditional way during the pandemic.
Thanks, Dean. And the last question I have for the three of you is the one about the future. So what do you want to try in the future? And what will you keep or discard after the pandemic? And I'll begin with you, Dean.
Well, one of the things that we noticed when we were bringing guest lectures in, and this is an interesting time because we were all sitting at home, and a lot of the people who are often jet setting around the world as international level artists were also sitting at home. So the quality of people that we were able to bring in for our guest lecture series was absolutely incredible. And of course, we didn't spend any money on transportation, meal per diems, hotels. That's where usually the money gets eaten up with these sorts of projects. So I would imagine in the future, we're going to have a lot more of a hybrid blend between in-person guest artists and lectures, recitals by our students. I think we're going to be streaming recitals from now on. We've set up a system so that our ensembles can also stream their rehearsals and their concerts out to the greater community in exciting kinds of ways. We are looking forward to getting back in person in lots of ways, but we've got an enormous amount done. Again, in our most recent newsletter, there's an entire page of our curricular revisions, which we have worked through. Again, our faculty was sequestered at home, so we were able to get a lot done in our curricular revision area. And there are definitely some advantages to working in virtual kinds of ways, and we'll continue to explore those. It's kind of funny to say this, but one thing I've noticed is that when you're in a classroom, it's kind of hard to direct students' attention sometimes, but on a virtual call, you can literally point your pointer and point at this note and say, check this out. So there have been some advantages that I would not have seen because of COVID, So it's been an interesting time, and I think that we're all, post-COVID is not going to look like pre-COVID in all kinds of ways, and there will be some disadvantages, but we've learned some really valuable lessons through going through the shared experience, and I think that a lot of good is going to come of it. One small issue is that we've been commissioning a lot of works because, again, composers have been sitting at home, and we've kind of been stockpiling repertoire in all of our ensembles that we're very excited to start getting at. So I think in general, we're going to see kind of an explosion of artistic outputs by our performing and composing community. This is very common when it comes to adversity. When humans are in adverse conditions, afterwards, there's almost invariably an explosion of really interesting art. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that's fascinating. Thanks, Dean. And Chris, please.
Well, I have to say I'm really looking forward to getting back to the laboratory. There's some things that don't translate, and because we do a lot of experimentation, quite often it doesn't work. And usually there's as much or more learning that gets done in the troubleshooting and figuring that out than gets done if it goes right the first time. But in terms of what I want to take forward, I think continuing with the group dynamics and seeing how that translates to in person, that's something I'm really looking forward to doing as we get back to in person, and also loosening the reins a little bit and just sort of providing that sense of freedom and that sense of agency in students. They're deciding where to take these projects and how to set them up and how they want to do it. So those are some of the things that from the pandemic that I'm looking to take forward. And then I also think there's some low-hanging fruit that is there. I used to always take it for granted that if we wanted to talk about difficult concepts of genetics or molecular biology, we almost certainly had to get together in my office, because I've never seen with my naked eyes anything I've ever looked on. It's always been graphical representations and cartoons, and it's usually sitting across the desk with a set of legal paper and just drawing it out and trying to explain abstract concepts on paper. And we don't need to do that anymore. I think I'm by no means a Picasso on the whiteboard with some of these virtual meeting tools, but I think that ability to meet students around the world, not just in my office, is going to be something that I take forward, and doing that with the graduate students, doing that with colleagues. I think just the way we interact is going to be different moving forward.
Thanks, Chris. And I can say that I agree with you. As a mathematician, I've been exposed in the last 12 months to all sorts of tools for visualization and describing abstract mathematical concepts that I never knew were out there. So it's definitely an interesting time for that. And Simonne, how about you? You have the last word.
Thank you. I was talking to my students in my class yesterday, the other day, and I said to them, what should we keep from this? And they jokingly said nothing. We should go back to how it was. And I laughed, and I felt the same way. There are things that I think there are benefits, but most of my students and most of the faculty are very keen to get back into the classroom and to keep that what we do best, which is communicating and being together. As a department, we have thought very much about the fact that the pandemic and the online courses allowed access to some students who couldn't have had access before. And so while some of us are desperate to get back into the classroom, we also recognize that this has actually been a great opportunity to expand the offerings and to expand who can have access to the courses. So we will be continuing to run some of our courses remotely. Even when we are back on campus, we'll be keeping the interdisciplinary courses when we're back on campus. And I think, as Dean was saying, we've been able to, especially those of us who teach about continents other than North America, have had an amazing opportunity to bring speakers in virtually that we didn't have before. And you can be in the classroom and still have a speaker zoomed in from somewhere in the world. And now we have the technology and we have the access. So I think most importantly is to get back and be face-to-face, but to also take some of the things that we've learned that work and that give access to students and make sure that the students still have access.
Thanks so much, Simonne. Well, I certainly have learned a lot today, and I'm going to let you know right now that I'm going to steal some of the terrific ideas I've heard from you today. Well, on behalf of the college, I want to thank you for your time and your expertise in these thought-provoking answers and reflections. And I want to let those of you tuning in know that we also have a short keynote talk in the program connected to implementing new curricula The speaker is Dr. Derek Postnikoff, faculty lecturer in mathematics and statistics and an interdisciplinary scholar. And he'll be speaking about Math 101 and the college's new quantitative reasoning requirement. I hope you get a chance to hear Derek's talk and to take in as many of the other features as you can during this milestone celebration. Have a great day, everyone, and a great rest of the term.